Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Something that people in the modern day forget is what the term socialism really means. 35 years ago, the world was a very different place. And imagine that, 35 years. There are generations of people that have grown up, been educated, gone out in the world and found jobs, all without the presence of the USSR. Some of us that are older remember very well what we were told about the possibility of nuclear war. The Soviets were this mysterious enemy that could be nuking us at any minute. And we were basically told, I am of the generation that was not told to duck and cover underneath their school desk. We were just told, you're screwed. The teacher said it a lot nicer, but that was essentially, they said, if the bombs come, that's it. And that was really the fear. The Soviets had nukes, and we had to build nukes to protect ourselves. Being in Canada, we were defended by the United States, but we did have access to some of their nuclear weapons, mostly air-to-air Genie missiles, but Canada was a nuclear power until the mid-1980s, and then we withdrew. But the United States has never stopped making nukes, and even though the USSR collapsed, Russia still has a huge arsenal today. But the mystery of what happened is whatever happened to the word socialism. In the first place, it has never properly been used. Socialism gives power to the people. It has the idea that the workers will own the means of production, which is an exact quote. And the workers will organize what to do. So if you work at a chocolate factory, then you and your workers and your fellow colleagues all get together and say, hey, Jim's good at sales. Let's get him to ring up every other chocolate place and see where we can sell this to. Andy is really good at, coordinating the trucks and stuff like that. And, anybody else, that you organize it yourself. The idea actually gives a lot of faith to the power of the people. Meanwhile, in the Western world, the Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic world, the workers have always been feared. Unions were seen as a kind of socialism. And for decades, even the idea of a union was stomped on, was crushed. It was destroyed, and countries had laws against unions because they were afraid unions would lead to socialism. So the elites have always been afraid of giving power to the people. And that stretches right back to the moment Karl Marx proposed his ideas, and probably well before him if I was going to do the research, which is already hard enough to go back to the 1800s. Let's keep things in context. The old world, with the USSR and United States, let's call it what it is, with the Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic places like Britain and stuff like that, did slowly start to come around. In the 60s and 70s, they started putting together workers' rights tribunals. Most places implemented some kind of a socialized healthcare network. And I've never understood why that is perceived as a bad thing. Yes, you can get better treatment for certain things if you're going to spend the money in the United States. But realistically, most of the population doesn't have that money. I know of one particular situation where this was a couple. The wife was diagnosed with cancer, and she didn't get better, unfortunately. And it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. That meant they had to sell their property and everything, and in the end, the woman passed away. So the husband now is currently working to pay off his debt. Can you imagine that? That's just a horrifying example, but it's not that rare. But because the idea of socialized medicine has that socialist word in it, it's perceived of giving power to the people. Admittedly, socialized medicine costs a lot of money, but I find it difficult to be the sort of person to tell anybody else you don't make enough money to be taken care of. This is in a vacuum. We're not going to get into the vaccine debate. We're not going to get into the pandemic. But it's important to say, you know what? Knowing that at any moment, any of my family, any of my friends, any of my listeners in most of the Western world, which have public health care, knowing that any of you might run into a situation, but you'll be taken care of, that's important to me. And I'm happy to pay my taxes, and I'm happy that those situations exist. One of my dearest friends passed away, and he was on dialysis, he was on all sorts of things, and that's incredibly expensive treatments. But it gave him a little bit extra time with his family, with his friends, so that we didn't know, he literally just passed one day. But we still had memories and moments that we could share together. We had years of those to build. So I cannot deny that to anybody else. The rich think it's socialist and evil. But the problem is the USSR and, North Korea, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea, even though they have one party and one person you can vote for, they're democratic. China, which is a one-party state, the Communist Party, which is in no way communist. These places all have what is called a command economy. That means the people in charge say, okay, you people over there, you're going to be employed at this factory making Ladas. For those of you who don't know, Lada is a Russian car, formerly a Soviet car. And, when you go through with your education, definitely they don't make any secret of it. There's a 2-level system. You go through to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher. Not a vice principal, not a principal, not on the board of governors. You're going to be a teacher. And that's the problem. Somehow, these command economies that are literally one-party dictatorships have become equated with socialism, the idea that you give power to the people. Now, Karl Marx and Engels, Frederick or Frank Engels, it's Engels anyway, Marx and Engels, they never proposed giving power to essentially a monarchy. They were always talking about how to organize the people. The idea of one commanding presence organizing the economy was never part of communism or socialism. But that's what people would have you believe. I mean, you listen to the people talk and, that's socialist, and socialist leads to the government taking all of your guns. No, it doesn't. One-party dictatorships like to take guns away. Socialism and communism, while they are flawed, which is expected for people who lived in Germany in the 1800s, they had a particularly prejudiced view. It's rather entertaining to read Marx and Engels' thoughts about the German work ethic as compared to the Polish peasants that are literally next door to them. So their philosophy is not bad. And indeed, communism, there's a few communist enclaves in the world. In Denmark, in their capital city of Copenhagen, there's a small enclave that's existed since the 1970s. It's Christian socialists. So they work for the church, and they're given their rations, or whatever you want to call it, their sustenance by the church officials. Because Marx and Engels proposed the entire philosophy from each according to ability to each according to need. Again, a direct quote, which is realistically a good way to run things. It's unfortunately a little bit unrealistic because everybody has different abilities and some people are multi-talented. There's always the danger you're going to wind up where One generation happens to have a whole lot of really talented scientists. Well, not everybody gets to be an astronaut. You might have a generation where everybody's a really talented artist, whether they're entertaining, whether there's singing, writing, speaking poetry. That's fantastic. Someone's still got to flip the hamburgers and feed people. So ultimately, that is one of the weaknesses in the theory. Now, workers organizing themselves, it depends on them being extremely democratic and working in a rational self-interest. And this is the lesson that we have completely forgotten in the West. Rational self-interest. We have self-interest. We can see that every single day with billionaires building rocket ships, which I have no problem with. Their money, they want to spend it on developing new technology, go ahead. Governments using their influence to get stuff. There's all sorts of examples of corruption. So it would be very difficult to monitor a factory or its team of workers and have them do what's rationally self-interested, which means you want yourself to do better. You don't want to be sweeping the floors in a chocolate factory for the rest of your life. Sooner or later, you want to be working a desk job or running the machines or something like that. And this is something we've forgotten to do. So I want everybody to stop attaching this idea of evil with socialism. And power to the people is a good slogan. People are selfish. We need to educate them. But the same token, we need to start trusting them. They're not going to be ruining things. They're not going to be making things. And socialism is not a bad word. Communism is not a bad word. So that's it for now. I think this will be a little bit of a series because I'd really like to go look at the way the 1960s and 1970s are impacting us today. But for everybody else, thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And we hope you have a fantastic day.